Hey, mushroom lovers, it's Michael again with another session of the Thriving Farmer Mushroom Summit. And our guest is Dan Miller. Now, Dan is armed with an MBA from Wharton School, and he is a visionary that became the founder and CEO of Steward, the world's first crowdfarming platform. It allows farmers to secure funding and investors to put funds into sustainable, regenerative food systems. His sage financial advice and experience is strengthening the broken agricultural system and supports all sorts of farmers and mushroom farmers alike. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dan, talk to us a quick bit about your platform and like how that got started.
So I began meeting farmers through a chef I knew in Washington, D.C., and he was sourcing directly from over 100 farmers in the region. And as I spoke to all these farmers, selling to a James Beard award-winning chef, selling out at farmers markets, products that people want, they all struggled with access to capital, which seemed a surprise. The demand is exploding for what they're growing, but funding options are unchanged. So the goal with Steward was a platform that lets any individual invest in these farms, provides the capital to farms, but also helps to rebuild links in our food system. And right now, most farms, and they know it well, are generally stuck with traditional funding options that are really built for large scale commodity financing. So if you're diversified, small to mid-sized, regenerative, it's a real challenge. You're not really meant to fit into that system. So our goal is to design a system that's built around that type of farmer that lets them promote themselves, tell their story, and raise money from a much broader pool of individuals.
Very cool. Well, if you want to take it away, I know you've got some slides to share, and we'll just go ahead and talk about different funding options and how to get funding for farms.
Perfect. I'll get started. So Steward is a platform for financing of regenerative agriculture. As a little bit of background on the market, I think everyone is aware of this as farmers, but there's more demand than ever for sustainable farm products. People are interested in paying more for these products. People want to buy more of these products. So I think it's well established that there's lots of demand for growers of these products. There's also a lot of demand from investors who are talking about ESG investing, which is environmental, societal, and governance, about putting capital into things that have a greater impact or do less harm. And so there's a lot of discussion around regenerative agriculture and people talking about moving money into that system, but in reality, less than 10% of this kind of investor market is actually invested in this sector. So there's a huge gap from the demand from consumers, the demand from investors, and then the reality on the ground is it's very hard to find capital. That is not flowing through. That's not, never an experience from a farmer I meet is, I have all the funding I need, and it's really, I'm satisfied as a farmer.
Well,
So the
and
challenge,
Dan, it's an easy process because going through most lending, even if it's the USDA or through a conventional bank, they don't understand, and it's just so many forms and things to fill out. So it's kind of a mind-numbing process, as it were.
and that's a big part of it. So yeah, regenerative agriculture struggle with access to capital. Most funding is dominated by government programs, either lent directly by the USDA or through banks. So it's a very rigid underwriting process. It's very cumbersome. It's very bureaucratic. Half of it is that the business model doesn't fit what they want, but the other half is what you said, just the time, just the effort. A farmer doesn't have the 30, 40 hours it takes to prepare these applications, nor the desire to do it. So the entirety of financing for agriculture is pretty much in this market, this government-backed lending market. There's very little private financing outside of that. Here and there, there's some funds that pop up that want to do local farm funding. Here and there, there's some high net worth investors that are willing to do it. But it's very informal, it's very challenging. And for a farmer to then figure out how to find that is not easy for them. So what Steward is a platform that connects both sides. It enables farmers to create a profile, submit a project for fundraising, prepare an offering, raise capital online, normally in the form of debt, so credit, either mortgage loans, operating loans, or equipment loans, with a fixed interest rate that investors receive. And then it also makes it easy for investors, whether those are people who are connected to the farm and customers of the farm, whether those are high net worth investors that are just passionate about the subject, whether those are families who are building a portfolio that's more aligned with and invest. So when farmers raise funding on the Steward platform, they're promoting it to their own network and people that already believe in them and as a farm, but they're also getting exposure to new people, new investors, people that are users of our platform who are interested in supporting farms. And that's part of the power of our platform is each farm expands a network which expands the depth of funding, which means other farmers can have that same opportunity. And that's really what the goal is, to build a market that supports farmers navigate what are complex regulations around raising funding. My background and how I came to this work was previous to Steward. I was a co-founder of Fundrise, which was the first real estate crowdfunding platform in the United States. That was originally built to fund real estate projects I was doing in Washington, D.C., to allow local residents to invest with me in those projects. So my whole career has been finding different ways to bring new investors into different types of investments that are traditionally not available and are the non-traditional type of investment. These were small historic buildings in unknown neighborhoods of the city, whereas the traditional investor wants a big kind of commodity style. So the commodity ag focus is really what all of financing is in America. They want cookie cutter, they want traditional, they want something with lots of historical data. They don't want to take risk. They aren't really interested in anything small. And the reality is we need to change the funding system to bring a broader pool of people who have a broader set of interests in investing. My farm connection, I did not grow up on a farm, so I'm one step away from a farm, but my mother's grew up on a farm and her family's been farming since the late 1800s in the eastern shore of Maryland. So the Chesapeake Bay to me is my ancestral watershed. That's what I saw being degraded and destroyed through misguided agricultural policies and land use policies and pollution. And so the goal with Steward originally was, how can I find the farmers who are farming in alignment with ecology and bring them the resources that they need. So the goal was to apply my experience from online fundraising from Fundrise, but also bring that expertise to this type of farmer. So the platform has had over 20 farms raise funding. We have a new farm every week that's raising capital. Most of them, I would say, between 5 and 10,000 on the small end. We just have right now a flower farmer in Atlanta on a quarter of an acre raising 10K for a few hoop houses, to farmers raising $500,000 plus for land. So the goal is, it's financing designed for the farmer depending on their needs, small, large, and we set the interest rates with them, generally between 6 to 10%. We set the terms, we promote the deal together, we raise capital together, and all of that's done on our platform. So within a few clicks, people can invest, create an account. You can see who's coming in, you can see who is thinking about investing and hasn't done it yet, and you can track all of that. So it's already a fully functioning platform. And in terms of mushroom farmers, we have one that is doing microgreens and mushrooms in Buffalo, New York. So it is certainly a type of farm that we've supported. And then we began with funding, and we've realized that there's a broader need for farms outside of funding. There's also a need to support their business. And so we've also helped farms with e-commerce setup for direct consumer. We're running a pilot of bookkeeping for a lot of the farms. And overall, the goal is financing is really something to unlock their business, to unlock growth. But if there's other ways that we can help with their business, whether that's doing it ourselves or making referrals, that's also very important. And I know you have a lot of experience with servicing farmers and helping them think through financing. And so they just need more access to more tools, more resources, more people that can help them run their business. Mm-hmm. So who is the Steward type of farmer? For the type of farmer I'm speaking to now, they live and breathe this, but for a lot of people, when they hear regenerative ag and they kind of confused about it, we're generally focused on small to mid-sized farms, regenerative in their agricultural practices, but very diverse in what they're growing. At least a few years experience. They've already learned how to farm. They've already committed themselves to their life of farming. Now they have markets, they have products, and they really need to take that next step for growth. And that's where we find that they're really throttled, that they can cobble together a little money to get started, credit cards, friends, a little bit of savings, an uncle, a cousin. They can get that basic amount of seed money, but now that they need to scale up production, they need some processing equipment, they need some more labor, they need transportation, they need fencing. They can't access that capital. So where we really fit best is those farms that really understand their markets, and now they're ready to grow. They're ready to take on financing to make those investments. We like to start with simple improvements. Is there a piece of equipment you would love to have that would make a big difference? Is there a small amount of operational capital that would help boost your business? And then over time, let's talk about land. Let's talk about more capital investment. But often there's a few things that can be done immediately, quick investments that start to yield a return, that start to accelerate the business. And that's how we think of funding. Instead of just one chunk once, it's an ongoing relationship of every quarter, let's plan a new campaign, let's raise a new amount of funding, let's figure out what you need for that bit of time. And so I think farmers need to think of funding as an always process, as there's always going to be a need for more capital. They should always be planning a quarter ahead. And because of the ease of our platform, you can prepare a project and launch it in a few days. It's not a huge lag. It's not like, well, I need to apply now because it's going to take 9 months and I'll get that. So it's somewhat of what like just-in-time inventory has been for firms that hold lighter inventory because they have quicker supply chains. It's a bit of the same for capital. Instead of just getting it in big batches every few years, think about breaking it up into smaller chunks over time. So that's, I would say, where we fit best in those types of farms. And these are farms, low expenses, low overhead, direct sales to the end user, and they have a sound business model. They just need a boost of funding to grow and get the infrastructure in place. Here's a case study. I always find it's helpful to talk about an actual farm. This is a hemp farm, so alternative like mushroom growers, a little different in exactly the way they grow. But this is a farm in Southern Oregon called East Fork Cultivars. They were a recreational cannabis farmer originally when we first met them. They were growing because one of their family members had a medical condition, and that's how they began. They wanted to expand into hemp. They were having trouble finding financing to do so. They came to us. They raised $640,000 of capital to purchase a 24-acre piece of land adjacent to their existing operation. This helped them buy the land, add processing capacity and drying into the barn that was already on site. And they had their first harvest 2 years ago. They now have USDA certified organic hemp that they're selling all around the country as flour and also as additives to different CPG products. And then this farm just last week raised $175,000 more on the Steward platform to expand their seed and genetics program, because they have such demand now from other farmers who want to buy their seeds that they're going up the supply chain and delivering more value at the seed level. They raised that $175,000 in 10 days. Investors as small as $100, as large as $50,000. And that was 3-year funding at 10% interest rate, which is a relatively high interest rate, but they set that rate because they see huge opportunities for growth. And they thought that's what would be needed to draw investment at that scale. So part of what we do is also help farmers figure out, how badly do you need the capital? What can you afford to pay? What's the need at this current time, and designing the fundraise around that. But they're a great example of a farm that has now raised 3 batches of funding from us. The revenue's gone from a few $100,000 to over $2 million this year. And they're really well on the path to becoming a kind of world-class operation, from just unlocking, one component at a time, integrating their supply chain, being, delivering the full product to the customer. And then I also wanted to go into our team. We have 8 different full-time staff spread across legal, regulatory, technology, accounting, all of the important elements. But we also have a farmer on staff, which I find that most farmers are excited to know. He himself has farmed for over 15 years, and he founded and ran a farm incubator, Lomax Farm Incubator in North Carolina. And so he spent over a decade working with farmers, helping them think through bottlenecks, think through their business plan, think through funding needs. And so the way we think of our funding process is, you don't need to come to us with a perfect package. You don't need to have everything thought through. We just want a passionate farmer with a good product who's ready to grow, and we'll help you think through, what are the first investments to get started? Where would you like to be in a few years, and how can we put that package together? So a lot of our financing also connects to putting them on the right path, so they're taking the right type of funding as they need it.
Very cool.
And then I will end with my favorite Wendell Berry quote. This was when I was reading The Unsettling of America in 2016, 17, as I was thinking about Steward, and I came across this quote. It was on page 11 of the version I had, that I just thought was pretty much described the goal of Steward. And in my mind, it's, this concept has been out there for a while. You need many more people engaged in agriculture, but you need also people tied their well-being to farms, and they need to be putting capital into farms, and we need to rebuild regional and local food systems around funding and resources. And so I think of the idea of what we're doing, crowdfarming, investing in agriculture, as fundamental and as old as there is. But in our modern society, we've just pushed ourselves out of the farm. We've disconnected people from it. And so it's really more of a return to probably how things were being done a few hundred years ago. When you wanted to expand your farm, you went to the local credit union and went around town and raised some money. And it's almost that concept, but layered on the technology of the internet, which allows you to distribute it very easily and quickly and push it through social networks and push it through broad networks. So the tool we've built lets you tap your existing network and first degree from that, but it also then lets you broaden into people that you otherwise would never have met and never would have been able to present the opportunity to. And that's how I think of it, as really narrative fundraising. Of you're telling your story, they're looking for a good investment, they're looking for a return, but the story is really what's going to drive it. And the person's belief in wanting to support you as a farmer and what you're accomplishing is really the factor that is most important to people. And then from that, part of our goal at Steward is make sure it's well vetted, make sure there's a reasonable plan in place. There's going to be a risk to any investment. There's always going to be challenges. We haven't had any defaults and any workouts, but we understand that's going to be part of it. But the goal is to have people invested in these businesses who believe in them and want to support them and want to become advocates for these farms.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about, let's say someone comes to this summit, they got really excited about growing mushrooms and they want to start. They probably need to, and because the thing about mushrooms is you literally can get started for a couple $100 on your, in your like a spare room, in a basement, in a garage. And so the goal would be for them to like figure it out a little bit, get some sales going, invest a few dollars of their personal money. And then once they get the system working, that's when they come to you.
Yes, that's normally the best fit. And mushroom growing, like you said, it's a very little amount of capital. So you can start with a starter kit at home and trialing. And so when you're now ready to grow the business, produce more, sell more, go down the value chain, that's where we fit in best. We just had a farm raise $5,000 a month ago. They were adding freezer capacity for broiler chickens. So small is fine with us. We love small. We're the opposite of a normal lender. We're not focused on the fee income. We're focused on how do we get more farmers doing this type of work and get the resources to them. So yes, I think that's a good description of they've tinkered with their system, they've trialed the product, they're selling it maybe at a farmer's market or through local networks, and now they want to do more and they want to fill more orders and they want to professionalize their business and they want to improve their website and they just want to have enough resources to really put their time into it. And most farmers, when they start working with us, are juggling a job on the side. They're still trying to figure out how to make it work, and by helping them grow through this funding, they can get farther down the curve of revenue and growth to actually then becoming a full-time farmer, which is the goal for many.
So let's see, so that they may want to invest in some equipment. They may want to invest in a bigger grow room. They may need to invest in vehicles. What about vehicles? Is that something you would just recommend going to have you done that before?
Yes, we have done vehicles. We've just did a vehicle a few weeks ago for a farm. We financed the vehicle originally, and then when they bought it secondhand, and then financed when it broke down, getting it repaired. So on both sides of the vehicle. So mortgage loans, the three categories: real estate loans backed by land ownership, equipment backed by a piece of equipment, and then operating, which is small, either labor and marketing or smaller pieces of equipment where there's not focused on the collateral of it. Yeah. So our view is as long as it's part of the enterprise of growing the product and getting it to market, we will support it. And the actual use just needs to make sense as part of their business plan, but there's not a specific restriction against one thing or the other.
Gotcha. Absolutely. So let's say, so how long do these loans go for? So let's say someone comes to you, they want to retrofit the garage and they need $5,000. What's the terms of the repayment?
I would say our kind of template loan, the most common is a 5-year loan, 8% annual interest with an initial accrual period of 3 months. So they take out the loan, they raise it through the platform, 26 people invest, they each buy the portion of the loan. They're now dispersed the funds. They start investing those funds. They don't have to make any payments for those first 3 months, so they can start to get a return on capital. They can put that money to work and start to see a yield from it. We can adjust that accrual period. So, for livestock, it can be longer. For produce, it can be shorter. The goal is to have the payment start when you're starting to see that growth and increased revenue. And then they start to make a fixed payment over time that fully amortize that. So for the operating loans and equipment loans, the goal is for them to be fully paid off within 5 years. For the mortgage loans, they're not amortizing, not paying off. The goal is to get the business to where it can then access traditional longer term credit because it has land ownership and more cash flow. So we think of our loans as development loans. That was my background in real estate development of how do you put the funding together to get the business there? How do you build a property that will have this income in the future, doesn't have it today? That's effectively what we're doing with farms of, if you had this funding, where can you get in a few years to what revenue level? And I think that's what's really missing in this type of agriculture of risk financing. Like they'll finance a look back. If you have 5 years of great cash flow and assets, you can get money. But if you're trying to grow and you're on the way up, it's a big challenge. And that's where our goal is where, with the right type of funding in 2 or 3 years, where can you get to that you can really support the financing and any future investments?
Absolutely. So how do you get from micro to the big time where the actual person will pay attention to you when you walk in the door? And I absolutely remember on our farm, that stage is when we started out, literally my father loaned us $5,000 the first year, and we had to pay that back that fall, which we did. And then we just kind of like self-funded. And then after, like 5 or 6 years, we had our USDA guy came to us and said, "Oh, I'm more than happy to loan you some money." But that was year 5. I mean, where were you year 2, 3, and 4 when we, actually needed capital? So that's where your system comes in to do that, both through, I think you said the crowdfunding is also, you guys also do the in-house as well. So
it's a good example of, if you could have had capital earlier in the period, you could have grown faster and you've scaled better. And then one thing we can also do is work alongside FSA loans. So we've done it where the FSA is the first mortgage and we come in second. So our goal is not to be the only funder, it's to fill the gaps that exist. Sometimes the gap is the entirety of the deal. Sometimes there's just a 10 or 20% piece that's needed. So it's really being a flexible source of funding that can fit within the needs of that farm at that moment.
Very cool. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on talking about funding and how mushroom farms can scale up. I know that people are going to be very excited about this aspect because it's one of the #1 questions we get.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And they can always reach out to me at dan@gosteward.com if they have any questions, or just go to our website and submit a project.